We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation. I remain Mark Angelides, and we continue our conversation with Neeraja Deshpande of the Independent Women's Forum. She's the Policy and Engagement Coordinator. And we've just been discussing issues with the federal government's influence and oversight of education across the states, and how that really just doesn't, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution for these 50 petri dishes of democracy. Now, what have you seen happening under the Trump administration in terms of releasing the shackles, as it were? And do you think he could go further?
There's a lot of ways in which Trump has really released the shackles. He has, the student discipline thing I just mentioned, right? That restoring order to classrooms, that's huge, right? Because what's happened across the country, thanks to a lot of, well-intentioned but ultimately misguided policies, is that, there's just complete lack of order in schools. And school, discipline, if I keep talking about discipline, the reason I talk about it is because it's the number one reason that teachers are leaving the profession right now, right? Because their classrooms are a mess. And it's not that they are able to control it's not that they aren't able to control their classrooms, right? If given the tools and the, allowance to control
and
their
the authority.
They would.
Yeah.
The authority, but their authority is continually undermined. They literally aren't allowed to do what it would take, to give the detentions, to give the suspensions, to give the failing grades sometimes, right? That are necessary really to maintain order. So they leave. And that's the sort of thing where if Trump says from top down, I think executive orders are, less than optimal sometimes, but sometimes they have to be taken out. And in this case, especially because of years of bad federal guidance, it's good to have some amount of good federal guidance, right, to really reverse course on that. So in this case, that's a really, really good move, right, where it's saying actually all that bad federal guidance from years ago, you can not only discard that, but you have to discard that. That's really, I think, going to make a huge difference in a lot of schools. And even a lot of people who don't support President Trump might actually find that that guidance is helping them, their children, their students, their classrooms.
But I'm wondering if part of the solution is not just the unshackling, as it were, not just providing the tools, but also looking at how the education model works. And I was reading a great piece of yours. I think it was in Real Clear Education, and you discussed how the education decided to jettison the tried and tested use of phonics for the whole word literacy, I believe, was the alternative. Which, and then of course that turned out to be an utter failure because we learned to read through a phonemic system. If education isn't better off being completely rethought, because we've seen so many people opt for homeschooling. We see the school choice debate is living large in the public psyche currently. Is there a remodeling that would help with making better rounded, better educated, better thinking children?
Remodeling is actually underway right now. As you mentioned, school choice is just taking off across the country, I think, because after COVID, parents just really realized they couldn't rely on their public schools, unfortunately. We are not, and I want to note, we at IWF, I personally, I am not anti-public schools, right? I am not anti-public school teachers. But part of what happens when we have excessive just monopolies by public schools, right? Which is what happens in the absence of school choice. You're paying taxes to go to your kids' education. Right. So you're still paying for your kids' education. It's not, it's not just private school parents who are paying for their kids' education. It's public school parents as well, just via taxes. So you're paying your taxes, you're paying for your kids' education, but that education is just sometimes ideologically deranged, or it's, the teacher can't discipline kids, or there's no, there's so much time spent on social emotional learning that there's no time spent on actual academics, or they're teaching balanced literacy instead of phonics, right? Whole word teaching reading methods instead of phonics. So when these sorts of things happen and parents try to advocate in public schools, often they're met with resistance because the public schools have no incentive to care. What school choice does is it actually forces parents to, I mean, it forces schools to listen to parents, right? It forces schools to actually have some accountability. And so I think that remodeling of education is actually a really good thing, right? Because we're, first of all, there's going to be trial and error, right? And error is going to be part of it. I don't think that means, everything needs to be completely thrown out the window. I think there are some pretty bad ideas in education, especially, you'll see some very tech forward private schools or micro schools or whatever. I'm very skeptical of more tech in education. So I think that's going to be more of an error than it is going to be a success. So you see some of these, what I think are bad ideas, but there's also a lot of really, really good ideas. There's also, I look at the classical education movement, for instance, right? Yeah. And that's, bringing sort of the great Western classics back to American schools. And that's, I think, a really, really positive development. And those kids are going to know their Shakespeare. They're going to know their Milton. And that's going to be a great blessing for them throughout their adult lives. And I think, you see these sorts of different ideas happening. And ultimately, I think they're going to benefit all of us as education turns into more of a marketplace in some ways and gets the benefits of the market, right?
Thanks ever so much for being here. Could you let our listeners and viewers know where they can follow your work, where they can get a copy of the report, and where they can get involved really with what you're doing?
So please check out Independent Women's Forum, IWF.org. There you'll find my report, Give Teachers a Break. That's the name of them. That's the name of the report. And, you can find all of our wonderful writing on education and on other issues, both policy papers and, op-eds, things we've written in the media, things we've said on shows like this one. And and if you're looking to really get involved in school choice, we have a lot of excellent resources on that. Just on getting involved with your local school boards, with school choice, with your PTA, there's lots of, we really have a lot of resources on our website. So please check those out. Also check out Independent Women's Network, which is a coalition of a lot of people across various states. I think we have upwards of 30 chapters at this point across many states, in which like-minded people meet and often discuss education. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks ever so much for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.